About 20 years ago, Barbara and I went with a friend to the West Coast. We started in San Diego, and we drove up the coastline, ending in San Francisco for a few days before we flew home. The scenery along that roadway was breathtaking. There were rocky coastlines and harbors and little beach towns, cliffside roadways that probably were not quite as precarious as they felt like they were. But as stunning as all of these views were, my strongest memory from the trip happened near the end, when we explored Muir Woods. Muir Woods is just north of San Francisco. It is known mostly for its 240 acres of coastal redwood trees. The tallest of them stands about 260 feet tall. It was a misty, foggy day when we arrived, and so the park was very uncrowded. As we made our way along pathways and trails, we soon left any other people behind us. The trees stretched up, their arms touching infinity. And when we stopped to rest, I realized I had never been in such a quiet place. There are very few birds in Muir Woods. The resin in the trees repels insects, so there's nothing there for them to eat. It was the faint shushing of the leaves in the breeze, the sound of our breath, the closest I have ever come to that sound of sheer silence that marks the presence of God. In that space, the land spoke to me in a way I had not heard it before, and in it was wisdom. Now, Muir Woods is not the only place that I have found sheer silence. I have listened for it many times since that day, on a retreat in New Mexico, on a dark Maine night, on a quiet lake in Vermont, and right here on these church grounds. Whenever I take time to be with nature, I can feel the ground beneath my feet. The trees whisper secrets to each other, and the voice of the land fills my heart with peace. Now, of course, the land and its riches are not only about feeding my heart. The land nurtures the food that we eat. And I'm particularly struck by this each year when we vacation in Maine. There's an organic farm very close to where we stay, and we do most of our shopping there. Everything, from produce to meats to dairy, comes from that farm. We get to see where the food we will eat was grown. Nothing there travels across the country. Nothing from across the country travels there. Nothing from across the world. No, it has been in the fields, and then it is on our table. And everything is so delicious. On this, the third week of creation season, we are all called to consider this earth that we walk upon and all that grows there. And on this day, we may expect to hear readings that praise the fruits of the land, the holiness of the earth, that still small voice of God that spoke to the prophets. No. Instead, we have the story of Cain and Abel and the first murder. And there's a very good reason for that. Because over these weeks, we have been rejoicing in the beauty of God's world. But today, we are reminded that we are stewards of this land. We, in a way, are co-creators of the world we live in. And what we do with, for, and to the land matters to us and to all who will come after us. Today, we're reminded that much of what we have created as humans and continue to create as humans is far from the perfection of the world God envisioned for us. We drive along the roadways and we can see trash on the side that people just tossed out of their cars. Yes, even here in Cumberland. Our news is filled with stories of land that once was fertile and now is barren and dry. Land that once could support life that's now under feet of water. Pollutions, plastics filling the oceans, the extinction of species are sins against the earth, and we commit them as humanity. But these sins against the earth are not new. Saint Basil, who lived and wrote over 16 centuries ago, states as a long-established fact that the ruthless cruelty of humans is, as Ellen Davis writes, preventing the voice of the earth from rising to God in song. Ruthless cruelty of humans is preventing the earth from rising to God in song. 16 or 17 centuries ago, people were building without care. They were growing crops for profit rather than for sustenance. They were dumping sewage into their streets and rivers. They were replacing sweet, fresh air with the stench of cities. Sound familiar? We haven't changed much, have we? It's not new, this non-care of the land. We can go back to the ancient stories of creation and see the birth of who we have become as a species. It was just after Adam and Eve had been flung from the garden because they refused to obey God. And a short time after that, Cain kills his brother, and Abel's blood calls out to God from the desecrated earth that had once been pure holiness. In many ways, we as humans continue to walk in the footsteps of Cain. We divorce ourselves from the ground by paving it over. We've reduced the plant life on our planet by almost 45%, and we have destroyed natural ecosystems as we take what we want and destroy or neglect the rest. We sometimes forget that we are co-creators of this world with God, and so our world reflects our neglect in ever more complex and terrifying ways. This week, we are called to recognize our connection to the land, to the soil that lies beneath our feet, to the ways that God can speak in the sounds or the silence of the natural world. This week, I challenge each one of us to spend time in nature. Take a walk in the woods, sit on a bench in our prayer garden, go into your own backyard. If you do this very early in the morning or later in the evening, you might even have the grace of a few moments without the sounds of the industrial world breaking in. This week, if you can, also try to eat locally as much as possible. Something that was growing right close by just a day or two ago. Go to the farmer's market. Go to the local butcher. At the supermarket, check the origins of what you will buy, at least for this week, and give thanks to God for the bounty that land continues to provide. God created this beautiful earth for us to care for and to enjoy. Today we are reminded that we are entrusted with caring for it well, healing it for ourselves and for all those who will walk the earth when our bodies are cradled in its embrace. Let us pray. Source of all life, we give thanks to you for your wondrous creation made manifest in the environment that surrounds us. Strengthen us in the mission of stewardship and care towards nature, the work of your hands, encouraging us to preserve life in all its precious forms. And let the people say,